This is a true crime story about power, obsession, and what happens when someone believes they can own another human being. If you have ever felt unsafe around someone who had power over your career, this story is for you. A mortuary technician at one of England's most prestigious private hospitals opened a freezer unit on a Tuesday morning expecting nothing. Routine check. Clipboard in hand. Coffee going cold on the counter. What he found instead would shut the hospital down for 3 days. Launch a Scotland Yard investigation, and end the career of a man the British press had once called the gold standard of cardiac surgery. Inside that freezer, curled on a stainless steel shelf at -20 degrees Celsius, was a woman in nursing scrubs. Her skin had turned a pale blue-gray. Her hair was still tied in a neat bun. And fastened around her left wrist was a diamond bracelet worth more than £8,000. She had not put it there herself. Her name was Marisol Aguilar. 28 years old. Quezon City, Philippines. She had crossed continents, passed every exam, worked every shift, and sent money home every fortnight so her mother could afford her medication and her younger brother could go to medical school. The man who put her in that freezer was Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates. 48 years old. Born into Old English money. Educated at Cambridge and Johns Hopkins. Considered so valuable to Hartwell Royal Private Hospital in Cheshire that his cardiac unit alone generated £47 million annually. 2 lives. 2 worlds. 1 operating room where everything began. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Have you ever worked with someone whose attention made you uncomfortable? Someone whose professional interests crossed a line so slowly that you almost didn't notice until you were already deep inside it? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because this story is going to show you exactly how that feels, from the inside, and exactly where it ends. Subscribe to these true crime channel. Because we do not just tell you what happened. We show you why. Let us talk about Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates. Because to understand this workplace obsession true crime UK case properly, you need to understand just how untouchable this man was. Born in 1975 in Harrogate, North Yorkshire. Only child of a prominent cardiologist father and a barrister mother. Educated at Harrow. Read medicine at Pembroke College, Cambridge. Completed his clinical training at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. He returned to England and trained under the legendary Sir Alastair Drummond at the Royal Brompton Hospital, where he developed a minimally invasive mitral valve repair technique that was eventually named after him. Surgeons in 12 countries were taught the Whitmore Bates approach. His patient survival rate for high-risk cardiac procedures stood at 98.4%. Nearly 11 percentage points above the national average. Hartwell Royal Private Hospital, a gleaming facility outside Chester, that charged its patients in the 6 figures and served royalty, foreign dignitaries, and footballers with equal enthusiasm, had recruited him in 2018 with a package that included a guaranteed salary, a share of surgical fees, and a grace and favor property on the hospital grounds. He drove a dark green Bentley Continental. He had been photographed with 2 members of the royal family at charity galas. He gave the annual keynote at the British Cardiac Symposium 3 years running. He received the NHS Exceptional Contribution Award in 2019, which was ironic, considering Hartwell was entirely private. His marriage to Cordelia Ashworth Fenn, daughter of Viscount Fenn of Wiltshire, had been covered by Tatler magazine. They had a townhouse in Kensington and a country estate in Shropshire. Household staff described a couple who maintained separate bedrooms, dined together perhaps twice a week, and communicated mostly through assistants. Cordelia later described their marriage in her victim impact statement as, and I want you to remember this phrase, a well-maintained structure with nothing inside it. Callum's routine was almost pathological in its precision. He arrived at 6:45 each morning. Reviewed patient files for exactly 45 minutes. Surgeries ran from 9:15 to 2:30. He became visibly agitated at delays of even 5 minutes. One theater nurse was dismissed not for causing a mistake, but for bringing him surgical gloves from a different drawer than usual. Not the wrong gloves. Just a different drawer. The hands that saved hundreds of lives, a colleague told the inquest, belonged to a man who was absolutely merciless with anyone who did not perform to his exact standard. This is the man who would become fixated on a nurse who had only been in England for 2 months. Now let us talk about Marisol Aguilar. Because if this workplace obsession true crime UK case teaches you anything, it should be that the most dangerous thing a woman can be around a certain kind of man is brilliant. Marisol was born in 1995 in Quezon City, Philippines. Eldest of 4 children. Her father, a construction worker, died in a site accident when she was 11, leaving her mother lured to support the family by working as a housekeeper for 2 different households simultaneously. Marisol excelled academically despite everything. She won a nursing scholarship to the University of the Philippines, Manila. Graduated summa cum laude in 2016, and spent 2 years at Philippine General Hospital before moving to Singapore General, where she became known for her instinctive approach to post-operative care. Her clinical supervisor in Singapore later told investigators, she seemed to notice things in the rhythm of the room, in a patient's breathing, in their posture, that other nurses missed entirely. Some people are just wired differently. She was one of them. In January 2023, Hartwell Royal Private Hospital advertised for senior cardiac nurses at a salary nearly double what she was earning in Singapore. Marisol applied not out of ambition, but out of arithmetic. Her mother's rheumatoid arthritis was worsening. Her brother Dominic was preparing for medical school. The numbers worked. She accepted. She moved into shared staff accommodation in Chester, a 3-bedroom flat shared by 5 other Filipino nurses. Bank records later showed she sent between 65% and 70% of her monthly earnings back to Manila. Within weeks of starting at Hartwell, she had built a reputation. She learned phrases in Arabic and Russian for the international patients. She developed a system for reducing post-operative anxiety in children using guided breathing and sensory distraction. Consultants began requesting her by name. The head nurse told investigators she was one of the most naturally gifted nurses she had encountered in 22 years. And then on the 14th of February 2023, during an emergency procedure that should have gone smoothly and didn't, Marisol said 4 words to Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates in front of his entire surgical team. 4 words that, depending on how you look at it, either saved a man's life or ended hers. Stay with me. This is where it starts. The 14th of February 2023. A 61-year-old private equity executive named Sir Roland Fisk was in Theatre 3 at Hartwell for what was supposed to be a routine coronary stent procedure. It was not routine. His heart went into sudden arrhythmia during the procedure, and Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates, who had overseen approximately 3,000 cardiac interventions in his career, ordered the standard pharmaceutical response. Marisol Aguilar, who had been working in Hartwell's cardiac unit for less than 5 weeks, stepped forward from her position at the instrument tray. "With respect, doctor," she said it clearly, calmly, with her eyes on the patient. His response pattern suggests vagal sensitivity. The standard dose may actually worsen the arrhythmia. The operating theater went completely silent. You need to understand the social architecture of a place like Hartwell's operating theater to appreciate what just happened. Nurses did not contradict Callum Whitmore Bates. Senior nurses did not contradict him. Registrars with years of experience would sometimes write dissenting observations in patient notes afterwards, rather than raise them in theater. And here was a Filipino nurse, 5 weeks on the job, standing in her scrubs, calmly telling him he was about to make a mistake. 3 seconds passed. Then he said, simply, "Proceed." Marisol proposed an alternative protocol, combining a lower medication dose with a physical positioning technique she had observed in Singapore. The patient stabilized within 4 minutes. Rather than anger, which was what every single person in that theater was bracing for, Callum displayed something a colleague later described as complete fascination. He watched Marisol work like someone watching a technique they had never encountered before. After the procedure, he asked her to stay behind for a patient debriefing. What was planned as 15 minutes became nearly 3 hours. He asked questions like he was collecting data, one witness recalled. Like she was a subject under study. And therein lies the problem. Because from his perspective, she was. In the days that followed, staff noticed changes. Callum began specifically requesting Marisol for his surgical team. He modified his notoriously rigid schedule to observe her during routine patient care rounds. He appeared in the cardiac unit during her shifts, when he had no clinical reason to be there. By early March, barely 3 weeks after their first interaction, he had begun summoning her to his office for what he called case consultations. Security logs would later show these meetings growing longer, more frequent, extending far beyond reasonable professional hours. If you can see what is happening here, comment the word "seen" right now. Because this is a pattern. And it is not unique to this workplace obsession true crime UK case. It happens in hospitals, in offices, in schools, in restaurants. The powerful man becomes interested in the woman below him. First it looks like mentorship. Then it looks like something else entirely. By March 2023, what Callum Whitmore Bates called a professional connection, and what everyone else in Hartwell called an obsession, had started to seep into every corner of Marisol's working life. The first inappropriate contact occurred on the 3rd of April, following a 7-hour emergency surgery on a 17-year-old with a congenital heart defect. The procedure was successful. Callum was in that elevated emotional state surgeons describe. After pulling a young patient back from the edge. At 11:42 at night, he summoned Marisol to his private office. Under the pretext of post-operative documentation. According to her statement to investigators. The conversation shifted when he took her hand. And told her that her presence calmed him. That she understood him in ways no one else did. And then, he kissed her. She froze. And if you have ever been in a situation like that, you know exactly what that freeze feels like from the inside. It is not a signal. It is not an invitation. It is your body going completely still because it does not yet know what to do. When she pulled back and told him it was inappropriate, he apologized immediately. Said he had misread the situation. Said it would never happen again. Classic. Textbook. Word for word the script these situations follow. Marisol was 28 years old. Thousands of miles from home. Supporting her mother's medical care and her brother's tuition on her salary. In a country where her visa was tied to her employment. She could not afford to lose this job. She chose to believe the apology and continued working. Many women in her exact position have made that exact decision. And every single time, the story continues anyway. By late April, Callum was texting her outside work hours. First about patients. Then about her plans for the weekend. Then about whether she was alone. In May, gifts appeared. A medical reference book with a handwritten inscription. Premium chocolates. Then a designer watch. Then a diamond bracelet from a jeweler in Chester. Worth approximately £8,000. Marisol returned every single gift. He interpreted every refusal as modesty. In his mind, she was simply too humble to accept what she deserved. She wrote in her journal. He told me my background made me unable to recognize kindness. He completely missed that I was saying no. And here is what investigators found most disturbing when they pieced together his messages. Callum Whitmore Bates genuinely believed they were in a real relationship. He was researching consultant positions for both of them at another hospital. He was looking at property listings. He had drafted, but not sent, a letter to his solicitor about beginning divorce proceedings from Cordelia. Meanwhile, Marisol was texting her roommate Jasmine saying she did not know how to get out without destroying her career, her visa, and her ability to support her family. Same situation. Two completely different realities. And that gap, between his delusion and her fear, is exactly where this case becomes a workplace obsession true crime UK story that absolutely has to be told. Here is a question. How would you know if someone was tracking your location, reading every message you sent, listening through your phone's microphone, and watching you through your own camera? You probably would not. Not at first. Not until they started appearing in places they had no reason to be. On the 1st of September 2023, commercial surveillance software was installed on Marisol Aguilar's personal phone. The software, sold to private clients for approximately £9,300, enabled real-time GPS tracking, full access to all messages and calls, remote activation of microphone and camera, and complete access to photos, browsing history, and app activity. Technical forensics confirmed the installation occurred during a 7-minute window when Marisol had left her phone on Callum's desk while assisting with an emergency procedure. 7 minutes. That is all it took to turn her phone into a surveillance device. Suddenly, his appearances made sense. He showed up at a Filipino community event she had not mentioned to him. In an interior room with no windows facing the street. He appeared outside her staff accommodation on at least 7 occasions. In September, always within 15 minutes of her arriving home. He referenced, in casual conversation, specific details of calls she had made to her mother in Manila. On the 12th of September, she mentioned to a colleague she was going to a Filipino grocery shop in Chester after her shift. Callum appeared there. When she expressed surprise, he said he had been passing and spotted her through the window. The shop had no window facing the street. In early September, without Marisol's knowledge, Callum arranged for her mother lured to be seen at a private specialist clinic in Manila, paying approximately £4,500 directly. When Marisol found out during a phone call home, her recorded voice message to her sister barely concealed the horror. He didn't ask me. He just did it. Mama thinks it's a hospital program for overseas workers. I don't know how to tell her the truth. On the 14th of September, she texted her roommate Jasmine, he was angry I went to the Tesco without telling him. Said he went to my flat looking for me. How did he know I wasn't there? Is he watching me? She was right. He had been watching her for nearly 2 weeks. On the 18th of September, Marisol volunteered for extra shifts in the pediatric ward. In an attempt to create distance, Callum appeared on the floor, visibly agitated, and insisted she return to cardiac immediately. When she explained she was covering for a sick colleague, he grabbed her arm with enough force to leave visible marks. She photographed those marks and sent them to her sister. That night, she wrote, "I'm starting to feel like I can't breathe. Everything I do is wrong somehow. I need to find a way out. But I'm scared of what he'll do." That sentence. That last sentence. She already knew. She was trying to find a safe exit. And she was running out of time. Now enter Cordelia Ashworth Fenn, Callum's wife. And before you decide how to feel about her, hold that thought. Because this gets complicated. Cordelia was not heartbroken. Their marriage had been transactional from the start, and she had long since made peace with the absence of genuine intimacy. What concerned Cordelia was not love. What concerned Cordelia was reputation. Her family name. Her father's title. The social scaffolding the Whitmore-Bates marriage was built to support. Over spring and summer 2023, she noticed changes. Extended unexplained absences. A distracted quality at social events. Credit card statements with charges she could not place. She hired a private investigation firm in August. By late September, she had a complete file. Photographs at a hotel in Chester. Receipts for jewelry totaling over £260,000. Transcripts of recovered text messages. On the 2nd of October 2023, she staged the confrontation in their Kensington townhouse. With the meticulous calm of someone who had rehearsed every word. "I believe congratulations are in order," she told him, as he poured himself a drink. "Your nurse, Marisol, has apparently resigned. I assume she will be joining you wherever you are going next." She laid out the photographs. The receipts. The transcripts. Then she outlined, without emotion, the connections her family maintained with the General Medical Council and the private healthcare regulatory bodies. Her brother-in-law sat on the board of one of Hartwell's primary insurance partners. A morality complaint from her family, supported by this evidence, would trigger an immediate suspension of his clinical privileges. "You have one choice," she said. "End this immediately and completely. No contact. No explanation. Continue your work in this marriage as though nothing happened. You have until Friday. If I do not have confirmation by then." My father makes one phone call. Then she left for Wiltshire. The following morning, the 3rd of October, Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates's hands, which had been functionally steady for 20 years of surgery, visibly trembled during a valve replacement procedure. He made an incision several millimeters from the intended site. He referred to a male patient as she during the procedure. That afternoon, he prescribed a cardiac medication at 10 times the standard dose. The pharmacist caught the error. By October 4th, he was in the hospital library until past midnight. Search records showed queries for flight routes to the Philippines, Manila accommodation, and international transfer of private assets. His journal entry for October 4th reads in part, "She doesn't understand what we have. Nobody has ever seen me the way she does. Without her I will be completely alone again. I cannot allow that." The forensic psychiatrist who later assessed Callum told the inquest, by this point he was experiencing the simultaneous collapse of two constructed worlds. The professional identity threatened by Cordelia's ultimatum, and the romantic delusion cracking under the reality of Marisol's imminent departure. For someone with his profile, this represented an existential crisis with no acceptable resolution. In his mind, only one option preserved everything. The 6th of October 2023. Marisol Aguilar knew nothing about Cordelia's ultimatum. But she knew enough to know she needed to end this. Clearly, finally, and on her own terms. She had given her notice. She had a flight to Manila booked for the 15th. She had arranged for her brother Dominic to meet her at the airport. She had packed 2 of her 5 bags. She chose the hospital chapel for the conversation. Public enough to feel safe. Private enough to be heard. Security cameras covered the room. There was no audio. At 1:58 in the afternoon, she entered the chapel, carrying a small photograph of her family. Callum arrived 3 minutes later. The footage showed her speaking first, her posture open but resolved, the photograph placed on the pew between them like a small, quiet declaration of where her real life was. He shook his head repeatedly. As the minutes passed, his body language shifted. He leaned forward. He stood and paced. He sat closer. He produced a small jewelry box. She declined with a gentle headshake. At 2:43, she texted her roommate. "I told him about Mama's condition and the job back home. He didn't take it well. First he offered to bring my mother to England. Then he offered to set me up with a private practice. When I said I was still leaving, he went very quiet. And said we would discuss it again when I was thinking more clearly." That evening at 7:24, Callum sent Marisol a text. "I need your help with a case tonight. Come to the hospital mortuary at 11:30. There is something important about a patient you need to see before you make any final decisions." She replied at 7:46. "I am on cardiac until midnight. Can we discuss this tomorrow during regular hours?" His final message came 1 minute later. "This cannot wait. 11:30. I will explain everything then." At 9:32 that night, Marisol sent a message to her sister Anna in Manila. "Something feels wrong about tonight. If anything happens to me, all my important documents are in the blue folder in my locker. Tell Mama I love her." She went anyway. Not because she was naive. Not because she did not sense the danger. She went because he was the most senior surgeon in her department, and when someone in that position says a patient case cannot wait, you go. That is the hierarchy. That is the architecture this entire workplace obsession true crime UK case was built on, the power that people like Callum exercise, without ever having to raise their voice. Security cameras captured Marisol walking toward the hospital basement at 11:28. She paused twice on the corridor, as if considering turning back. Then she pushed through the mortuary doors. Callum had arrived 20 minutes earlier through the executive wing, using his private access card to bypass security screening. He was wearing casual clothes. The security officer who greeted him later noted. The leather medical bag he carried seemed unusually heavy. At 7:23 on the morning of the 7th of October 2023, a mortuary technician named Devraj Patel opened freezer unit 3 during his routine inventory check. The electronic log said the unit was empty, scheduled for maintenance. Devraj followed protocol and checked anyway. He later told investigators, "At first I thought it was a prank. Then I noticed the frost on her uniform, and the stillness that goes beyond sleep." He activated the emergency protocol at 7:25. The senior pathologist who arrived 4 minutes later recognized Marisol immediately. She was one of our most respected nurses. Finding her there was incomprehensible. Cheshire Constabulary's Major Crime Unit arrived by 8:15. Detective Chief Inspector Priya Sandhurst took command. "From the moment we arrived, we treated this as a homicide. The circumstances made any other conclusion impossible. The evidence came together with horrifying speed." Security footage confirmed Marisol entering the mortuary at 11:28 and Callum arriving 20 minutes earlier, neither emerging. Callum returning to the mortuary at 2:14, 4:07, and 5:52, each visit between 15 and 30 minutes. His administrative credentials used to mark freezer unit 3 as empty and deactivate its temperature alert. Surgical supply inventory flagged 200 milligrams of propofol, unaccounted for from a procedure Callum had performed the previous day. The autopsy confirmed. Cause of death, extreme hypothermia following sedation. The injection site on Marisol's neck showed clinical precision. Defensive wounds on her hands and forearms showed she had fought back. DNA under her fingernails matched Callum, and fastened around her wrist, placed there after she lost consciousness, was the diamond bracelet she had returned to him. Within hours, investigators had accessed his phone, his hospital computer logs, and begun interviewing Marisol's colleagues. Jasmine, her roommate, provided text messages showing Marisol's escalating fear across 6 weeks. The surveillance software was traced to a purchase made on Callum's credit card on the 28th of August. By 4:30 in the afternoon, DCI Sandhurst had enough. Rather than arrest him in front of theater staff, police coordinated with hospital administration to summon Callum to an emergency meeting about a patient safety matter. When he arrived at the administrative suite at 5:45, he was met by 4 officers and DCI Sandhurst. The shock on his face lasted only seconds, before being replaced by something witnesses described as an unsettling calm. Before the detective had finished reading his rights, Callum interrupted. "She was not supposed to suffer. I made sure she would not feel the cold. It was the most merciful way I could keep her with me. Let that land." He thought what he had done was merciful. The trial of Dr. Callum Whitmore Bates opened at Chester Crown Court on the 5th of December 2023. Prosecutor Amara Osebansu opened with a timeline built from 43 witnesses, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, text messages, and journal entries. This was not a crime of passion, she told the court. It was a crime of possession. When he realized he could not control Marisol Aguilar in life, he made the calculated decision to control her in death. Callum took the stand on the 18th of December and described their relationship as a connection of rare depth. When asked if he understood that she had her own life, her own family, her own future entirely separate from him, he looked genuinely confused. Then he responded, "She was going to leave. I could not allow her to destroy what we had built." You keep using the word murder, but you are missing the context. I simply ensured she would remain with me in the only form possible. There was audible gasping in the courtroom. After a 12-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours and 20 minutes before returning unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts. Premeditated murder, unlawful imprisonment, stalking, misconduct in a public office. Marisol's mother Lourdes, who had traveled from Manila in a wheelchair, delivered her victim impact statement in English. You took my daughter's breath, her future, her chance to see her brother become a doctor. You took the hands that would have cared for me when I was sick. You took a light from this world, because you believed you could own it. Judge Harriet Calloway Firth sentenced Callum Whitmore Bates to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. His final statement to the court: history is full of passions that others could not comprehend. I acted from a connection so profound that ordinary morality has no frame for it. He is currently in HM Prison Franklin in County Durham, assessed quarterly by forensic psychiatrists who report that his delusions remain entirely intact. Hartwell Royal Private Hospital introduced mandatory dual authorization for all after-hours access to restricted areas, biometric logging of all mortuary entries, and a complete restructuring of its international nursing support program. Patient numbers fell by 30% in the 6 months following the murder. The CEO resigned in January 2024. Cordelia Ashworth Fenn filed for divorce in November 2023. Her financial settlement was significant. Phone records later revealed she had called her father and her solicitor before contacting anyone about Marisol's family, a timeline the court noted but did not pursue. In Manila, Marisol's remains were repatriated on the 15th of January 2024. Her memorial service at Santo Domingo Church drew over 2,000 people. The Philippine government awarded her the Bagong Bayani Medal. Hartwell established a nursing scholarship in her name. A settlement of approximately £900,000 was placed in trust for Lourdes and Dominic. And outside Philippine General Hospital, where Marisol began her career, there is now a small garden with a plaque. This workplace obsession true crime UK case is a story about what happens when power is never checked, when warning signs are witnessed and dismissed, when the system protects the person with the credentials instead of the person with the fear. Marisol did everything right. She documented. She set boundaries. She planned a safe exit. And none of it was enough. Because the institution protected him until it was far too late. Tell someone. Because Marisol told her sister. She just ran out of time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for sharing stories like this one. Because awareness is not just a word. It is a lifeline. If this story moved you, please subscribe to True Crime, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment about what part of this story stayed with you. And may you be blessed. Subscribe, because the next story is already waiting. Rest in peace, Marisol Aguilar.